Hello and welcome to Movie Night with Andy and Gabe, and today we are joined by a very special guest. He's big, he's bad, don't talk about Lion King, you might make him mad. It's the artist formerly known as Confused Matthew, Daniel. Hi.
Hello. Hiya.
And it's also worth noting that he is my brother. Hi, brother.
Hello. I'd also like to say that Dan and Matthew are very, very different and very separate people. And if you've ever, first of all, if you've ever watched a Confused Matthew video, I know, I'm sorry. And if you're listening to me now, do not expect to get Matthew because I'm very, very different. But I'll try to be enraged just for old time's sake.
No
Yeah.
pressure. So,
Yeah.
so the genesis of this episode was really interesting because I got a message from Gabriel after we recorded our episode of Mulholland Drive last week saying, my brother wants to come on and talk about Mr. Nobody. And I have a friend who has been on at me to watch Mr. Nobody for the better part of about 5 years, and I've just never got round to it. So I'll introduce us. As far as we know, we only get to live one life, and we can never know what would happen if we made different choices, assuming we have free will at all. Mr. Nobody, a European film directed by Jaco von Dormael, if that's pronounced right, gives us a character who is actually able to experience multiple possible lives. The first 30 minutes of this movie sets up the premises that Nemo is the last mortal man on Earth and appears to have some sort of gift to see into the multiverse. We see multiple branching parts of his life, and the 3 women he chooses to spend his life with. In some timelines, they're his partner for life, and in others, those same people are simply someone he saw while he was stopped at a traffic light. The movie plays with both the butterfly effect and multiverse theory for a beautifully shot, sometimes surreal story. The movie released to a mixed critical reaction on release, but it's since developed a cult following. And Gabriel, you can get your jokes out of the way now.
Okay, I'll do that. Well, when was this movie released? I'm curious. I wasn't.
2009.
2009. Okay.
Yeah.
Um. So, yeah, I had this left me with some questions specifically about England, and I happen to have an Englishman here with me that I can have answer these questions for me.
Indubitably.
Yeah, so the first question is, does it randomly start pouring in England, like,
Yes.
very rapidly?
Yes.
It does.
Yes.
Interesting.
Aggressively.
I was curious. I was genuinely curious about that. Question 2. I'm reading off of my notes, by the way. Question 2. Don't they have joint custody in that UK?
Yes.
Well, I
But that,
mean,
that
even if
depends
they
on
do,
parents being responsible, though.
Right.
also, I do believe, I don't want to get ahead. I don't want to get ahead of the discussion of the film, but I do believe that the parents were going to be living very far away. So even
Yeah.
if they did have joint custody, it would be very difficult to get the kid from one place to the other.
These are not actual criticisms of the film. These are just funny
Yeah.
things that I thought about them. Question 3. What the fuck sauce do you guys put in mashed potatoes? If you put anything in mashed potatoes that's red, I don't understand you as a person. What sauce do you put in mashed potatoes?
That was no mashed potato that I've ever seen before in my life. That looked like custard.
Thank
I mean,
God.
yeah, no, no, like mashed potato. Like, I mean, some people, because obviously the classic staple here is bangers and mash, which is mashed potato and sausages, and
Sure.
some people will have ketchup with their sausages. But I've never known someone to dip their mashed potato into ketchup.
I
I'm
wouldn't
sure
want
there's
to
a
know something like that.
I am sure there is a degenerate out there that does it, but I can't say I've ever done it.
Well, whoever you are out there, if you're listening, fuck you.
Fuck you.
The number 3. This one was a little more serious. I liked how the Mr. Sandman turned into a punk rendition when he turned into a teenager. When he turned into me as a teenager, I really like that part. Here I wrote, I hate the Eurythmics. I don't even remember but I do hate the Eurythmics. So I will briefly get my actual thoughts out of the way and let the two of you give yours. I really like this movie. The Earth didn't move, but I really my sense about this was that one possibility here is that this was a person who was very old, who was looking back at his life, who couldn't quite remember which things were true because he was remembering these watershed moments, as we all do. We remember the bullet points. When my wife was pregnant, we were doing a class about how to deal with pregnancy, and I remember the instructor said, you won't remember the whole experience, you'll remember the bullet points. And that was kind of what this movie was. And it was, I really, really liked the fact that the point of the movie, which was no matter which one of these things that no matter which one of these lives were real, they all would have mattered. Every one of them would have been just as meaningful as all the others. And how these, as I say, watershed moments in our lives can really change the outcomes. But no matter what choices we make, they're all equally meaningful. That was really cool. The thing that brought it down a little bit for me was that I was reminded of something that Joe Bob Briggs said about the remake of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which apparently, I haven't seen it and I haven't seen the original either, but apparently a lot of people really liked that one and thought it was a really good remake. His opinion was, in his words, it was too slick. It looked too clean. It took the movie was fine, but it took the grit out of what could have otherwise been a much more scary or suspenseful movie. I kind of felt, having watched the last two that we've reviewed, me and Andrew, Buffalo 66 and then Mulholland Drive, these have both been in this sort of, I guess they say, art film or more artistic film category, and they all kind of had that grit to them. This one seemed to be going for the same kind of thing, but it was way polished, and I think that kind of detracted a little bit from it.
It looked sterile, like a hospital.
Yes, yeah.
I actually had in my notes that this movie is lit and color graded to look like a hospital ward.
Interesting. Okay, so I wasn't the only person who took
No,
it.
I understand what you mean.
Okay. Well, then, so those are I'm going to leave it to you guys because I probably have the least to say about it. I really liked the theme of the movie. It was fine. It was okay. It was a little too polished, and everything that I said, the choices in your life that you make, all of those lives would have been just as meaningful. Is that 2 hours and 19 minutes worth of movie? I don't know. But
what I was going to say about it was that I, at the end of my notes, I put my God's honest thought on the movie, and the first thing I put was it's too long.
Yeah.
I don't have much bad to say about it. Buffalo 66 was a film where I felt like there was stuff that I liked in a movie that I mostly didn't think very much of, and I feel kind of the opposite with this one. I think this is a good film, and I can understand why it seems people who like this film seem to be very moved and touched by it, and I'm not taking that away from them, but I felt like it was too long. And I can handle a long film if a long film always feels like it's building towards a point. But because this film is, of course, not told sequentially, it can't be told sequentially because of the type of story it's telling. And it goes back and forth and in and out and upside down and round in circles. I really, really felt that length, and I started getting really restless as I went with it. But I do like it. My big takeaway from watching this, though, and it's something that I was trying to put my finger on for a while, and now I have to hope that my career never takes off and I never work with him because it would be very awkward. I think Jared Leto's fine, and he's pretty good when he's playing his actual age, but him acting old, I feel like I've learnt that he really wants to be a character actor like Willem Dafoe, but Willem Dafoe always has what might be a big exaggerated character, but there's humanity that you can see in that character at all times. And with Jared Leto in this film playing the old man, while the old man makeup is excellent, what would eventually become his Joker laugh and the really voice, I felt like, they say that some men wear a hat, but other times the hat wears them.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like his hat wears him.
Yeah.
I think he gets lost in the theatrics of that character, and it's something I've noticed with him quite a bit. So I felt like I spent... He's not actually in this film that much, but I feel like I spent about 50% of the time he was on screen thinking he was good, and the other 50% of the time wishing they'd actually cast an old man, considering that they cast younger actors for him anyway.
I wonder what you think about this. Nick Meyer said that when he was working with William Shatner, that Shatner, at the beginning of the day, he would want to do and he was talking obviously about Star Trek 2. He would want to do everything in this big, bold, leading man kind of thing. And if you remember Shatner's performance in that movie, it was very somber and dejected for a lot of it. And he had a really hard time getting Shatner to go there because it was too animated. And what he would do is he realized that if he just did 20 takes, Shatner would get bored. And this is the thing that I honed in on. He said that he would stop acting and start just behaving. And it seems like
Absolutely.
Leto has a hard time just behaving and a hard time not acting.
Yeah,
I was gonna do another Nick Meyer quote here. I think it's even more apt. That's a very apt thing to say about Leto. I don't think much of Jared Leto as an actor. That has nothing to do with him personally. That's not an insult, or I just, as far as his craft is concerned, I think he's bad. I liked him in this movie more than I've liked him in anything else. I would go so far as to say I liked a couple of his performances. It's very interesting because I didn't mind him as the old man, probably just because it was so weird and it actually gave him a chance to do something other than just sit there and not act very well. But it was overdone. But it was at least something, I guess, to me. If they had actually brought in an old man, I think that would have been much better.
Because but the makeup, I would say the makeup is so thick and so exaggerated that it doesn't look like an old Jared Leto anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
So why not have
he's indistinguishable, right? Exactly. And his performance was so caked on. It was as caked on as the makeup, I think.
I just wanted Christopher Plummer.
I just wanted
Christopher Plummer.
I got to tell you, I was thinking Crispin Glover. I wondered how Crispin Glover would have handled this role. This is the kind of thing I think he would have been.
I think it was a mistake to put him in the makeup, just to do it to say, oh look, it's the actor that's in the. But as you say, they got younger people to play him anyway, so get an older person to play him. They're not. I know they can't have Jared Leto play his 15-year-old self, but if they're going to do that anyway, yeah, have an old man. So Nick Meyer once talked about the difference between an actor and a movie star. He said an actor is someone who tries to convince you that they are the character they're playing. A movie star is someone that tries to convince you that the character they're playing is them. And I think Jared Leto wants to be an actor, and I don't think he's good at it. He's like I said, there were some times in this movie where I thought he did very well. When he was married to the Elise character, when he was sort of the professor type with the glasses, and I thought he did very well there. When he was playing the one who was going after Anna, he was terrible. So it's sort of a mix for me in this one. I didn't want to start out my thoughts on a negative, but I guess I'm kind of indifferent about the Jared Leto aspect of this. With regard to the old man, I didn't mind it, but I think they could have done better. I will say of this film, if this is an appropriate time for me to jump in with my thoughts.
I was just going to say something about the acting, and then move on. But
yeah.
What? So when you say when Gabriel says about he has a hard time behaving, so Sanford Meisner, who was the acting practitioner, who he ran his school and he taught it, and he never wrote a book on how to act like a lot of other people did, but Sanford Meisner learned from Stanislavski, and now you have a bunch of people teaching Meisner method and claiming that they're doing it his way, but no one really knows. But they all agree that he said that acting was living truthfully under imaginary circumstances. The
Yeah.
idea that you you go into a scene and you're focused on, what do I want? What does my character want? What is the obstacle stopping my character from getting what they want? You don't even think necessarily about how you're feeling. And the reason I invoked Willem Dafoe, because I think Willem Dafoe is an actor who completely understands at all times what his character wants and what the obstacle is. So even in something like The Lighthouse, and he's got that big old bushy beard, and he's speaking in that old-timey exaggerated kind of voice, and he's screaming and shouting about Triton and Poseidon, you always know what he wants. And I didn't feel that old man Leto wanted anything. I felt like it was just a pantomime. But
Pantomime
was,
is the key word that I would use. Yeah, yeah, and it's a little harder in this one because it's hard to say what the old man wanted, because at times it felt like he didn't know. Like either he was expounding on the potentiality of all the lives he could have lived, or he forgot which one was real and he just mixed them up. But regardless, every time he spoke, yeah, it was a caricature, and it wasn't such a, the movie jumps around so much that I think if it had been if those scenes had been longer and in more closer succession, it would have bothered me. Didn't bother me in this case, but I don't know what we would have lost if they had just cast an old man. Like, and I don't know, like, obviously it would have saved Jared Leto a lot of time in the makeup chair because the makeup was really good, but you're focused on the makeup. You're not really focused on this old man and connecting with him and trying to get to know him and trying to figure out what he's all about. You're like, oh wow, Jared Leto's doing a funny voice. That makeup is really caked on. It's pretty good. So it takes away from the scene and kind of puts your focus more on the aesthetic of the craft of the makeup, I guess. But it was a little bit.
yeah, and I gotta say,
it didn't really work.
I don't think it looks like him. It doesn't have the same nose shape. I know noses
Yeah.
change as you get older, but it doesn't have the same, like, they don't change that much. I just didn't think it even looked like him. Like,
Yeah.
so why not have an actor? But we've rambled about that. But like, what do you make of the film? Because you requested to do this one. So what do you
Yeah.
think of
Yeah,
it?
I've been curious as to. I'm glad you jumped into. I've been curious as to what my brother would think about this for a while. I didn't know which way he was gonna go. This kind of film is not typically the kind of film that he and I enjoy in general. I saw this for the first time, I think in 2012, and I came away with it going, I think I liked it. There are things in this film that I really liked. There were parts of the film that I thought about way after it was over, and I never stopped thinking about it the first time I watched it. The second time I watched it, which was last night, I think I liked it even more. Um, I think the thing that really grabbed me about this is kind of what Gabe said, that no matter what path your life takes, it's all important. It's equally meaningful. Just because we didn't make the what is considered to be the right choice doesn't mean that our life is ruined. And there's no such thing as the one that got away. They're all beautiful. I really really love that. I'm also a complete and utter sucker for a love story. So every single time Otis Redding is played in this film, I'm just gone. It just got me. That like I loved everything about that. Uh, the jumping around all over the place, I was surprised. It was rarely, with the exception of a lot of the front-loaded stuff in the beginning, it was rarely jarring. Every single time that it jumped to something else, I was kind of intrigued to see more. Um, the characters were really exceptional. I think of this director. This was a Belgian film. I was surprised to find. I really thought it was French, but it's actually Belgium. I think this director captured the spirit of young love perfectly every single time Nemo and Anna are together. That was just like it was a fantasy. It was a fairy tale. Like nobody is this in love when they're together all the time, every day, forever. But he captured the essence of that so very well. The Anna character is your kind of your typical whimsical, comes into your life and changes everything forever. But I love that story, and I thought this actress played that really, really well.
Yeah, that was very
Young
young
me,
Juno Temple. During the
yeah.
teenage years, very young Juno Temple, who was my standout in this film, my standout
Wow.
performance.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Um, the character Elise, who was the one where he had kids with, and she has a lot of emotional problems. She has a very specific mental illness, and it is, uh, oh shit,
Borderline
it was right
personality
on
disorder.
borderline personality disorder. And I tell you, I know two people who have borderline personality disorder. It's not. I think that he might have focused just a little bit too much on I'm horrible, I ruin everybody's life, what's wrong with me, beating herself in the head. That is part of that. But people with borderline personality disorder can switch between all different kinds of emotions very, very quickly. They might have focused just a little bit too much on that one and not enough on how quickly and how it can just hit you in the face, where somebody is just like, God, what's wrong with me? Fuck you, I hate you, I'm sorry, I ruined everything, to, hey, let's go out and get a pizza. Let's go out and dance naked in the town square and enslave the
You know,
minister. Uh,
yeah,
uh,
if I can jump in there too, I want to comment on that because I also have known several people and had
yeah,
relationships with several people who had borderline personality disorder. The one thing I'll say about that, you're right. They only gave you the most extreme side of that, and they didn't show how quickly that can jump around.
they
My
did
sense was,
once. Uh,
yeah, sure. Well, the birthday party and
Yeah, the
stuff
birthday
that
party. I
was
wanted more like
very
that. I wanted more like that. She's like she's in bed
mhm,
and she can't get out of bed, and it's during
right,
a depressive cycle, and she's like, "Oh God, I gotta get up!" And instantly
and
she's
it's
out
just
there being a
mania
mom.
immediately.
Yeah,
Yep.
and that
Uh,
was so accurate. I wanted more of that.
Yeah, that struck me too. One of the things that I thought about that was the fact that when I look back on that person, the stuff that I actually remember is usually the stuff that was portrayed in the movie because that's you like when she was on the ground screaming and people were coming out of the house and looking. I've had that exact experience, and it's
Me
not
too.
something, yeah, and it's not something that you forget, obviously, but it's not something that ever leaves your consciousness and never fails to be a really profound, scary thing that happened to you. So
Well,
that's
I'll say another thing about that. The way Nemo reacts to that is so true to life, because
yes,
he barely ever is said anything. Because what can you say to somebody who's going through something like that? All he
mhm,
did is hold her and say, "It's going to be okay. We're going to get through
yeah.
this," because that's freaking all you can do. The most extreme reaction he had to anything is when he set the car on fire. Because
By
when
the
you're
way,
when you're with somebody,
yeah,
yeah, when you're with somebody like that, you understand that they're going through something, and you understand that it's not their fault. Nevertheless, it can be very frustrating at times,
hmm
and
yeah.
sometimes you just want to set your car on fire. And
I
so,
just want to say that when we're talking about Leto's performance, that was my favorite moment that he had in that movie.
For sure.
The way that he did that so naturally, without expression, whatnot. Only he, I feel, could have done it the way that he did it. So that was the highlight for his performance for me in the film.
yeah, and that was the best character he played in the whole thing. I think he did a great job when he was playing the one that was with Elise, and the actress that played Elise. For all that, I kind of wish that they had captured a few more of emotions that get caught up in the cyclone of what happens to people who have borderline personality disorder. Nevertheless, she played that exceptionally well, and I always believed that it really is the condition that she had, and I always believed that her emotions were real. So props to that actress.
There was
Um,
Sarah Polly.
Very
Sarah
good, very
Polly.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this film the I and I'm not I don't want to just completely sing the praises of this film and have it done. I know this film is flawed. It's one of the most flawed films that I've ever liked. I'm kind of surprised that I liked it. I think it's trying to have I hate the term "have your cake and eat it too," because what else would you do with a cake but eat it? Why would you? In any case, I think it's trying to have it both ways with regard to the artistic stuff and sort of the avant-garde uh, interpretive stuff, and just being completely down to earth and having a very easy to follow time and story and elements with these people. You have very real world situations like with the birthday party one minute, and then the next minute you've got the people dressed all in plaid with the background in plaid, and his pants look like the pavement, and it's kind of both of those things don't always complement each other. It kind of feels like two movies smashed together, and you kind of either wanted him to go really really hard the avant-garde stuff or really hard the down to earth dramatic stuff. I'm not sure it mixed well all the time. I also don't know what we would have lost if we hadn't seen anything from the third wife. I'm talking about the one where he was rich and bored and he got himself killed because he was pretending to be somebody else. That seemed a little bit irrelevant.
A lot of
And
that could have gone.
yeah, I think I don't know if it had just been Elise and Anna, I think the film would have been better for it because that third one didn't spend too much time on her anyway. We didn't really get to know her that well, and I guess that was supposed to tie into his boredom and indifference to his life. But nevertheless, bored and indifferent isn't something you want the audience to feel when you're watching that, and I really did. I kind of liked the stuff, and this is what I'm talking about. I liked the stuff where he was writing the story about going to Mars, and then we kind of see that. But again, it also felt very out of place. It felt like that kind of belonged in a different movie. And then you get the completely bonkers off the wall stuff in the end about like the room flooding when he's trying to write the thing, and he might have done well to either marry those two elements a little bit better or just go one way or the other. But in any case, I thought this was an excellent love story. I thought it was an excellent, looking back on your life and wondering what could have been. Even the more out there stuff, like what was the old man real? Was it really coming from a 9-year-old boy? Is there some truth to all of it? I thought most of this film was done pretty well. It could have been shored up in the acting department with regard to Leto some of the time. Maybe they could have lost a storyline or two or three. It was too long. It never felt like it overstayed its welcome, but it just felt like
Lagged.
you're not. Yes, it lagged. You wouldn't have missed anything if they had cut some of this. So overall, I thought this was a really worthwhile experience, and flaws and all. There are parts of this film that I absolutely loved, and there are parts of this film that I really liked. I can't think of anything that I really hated about the film. There's more just stuff where I was like, I could have done without that. But for the most part, I thought it did what it set out to do very well, and it's occupied my thoughts for 10 years. So I think it must have done something right. So that's where I landed on the film. I thought it was very interesting, and I thought it was pretty great.
I think if I had one issue that wasn't the length. Last week we talked about Mulholland Drive and our different interpretations of it, and Gabriel described Mulholland Drive as being like the Bible. He said it felt as much like scripture as it did film.
Yeah.
And not every film is Mulholland Drive, and I'm not criticizing this film for not being the quality of Mulholland Drive, but I felt like this film would set up a bunch of ideas and start to explore them, and then it felt like the film would have a little bit of a panic and explain it all to you and go, okay, Jared Leto puts on the glasses and now he's going to explain the point to you like a teacher. And I felt at several points in the film, especially at the end, that the film wasn't confident enough in its messaging and in its ideas to just leave it to the audience, and instead it goes, but you see, we're all in the big gelatinous cube and Mr. Krabs put that thing in there to make the thing do the thing, and that's that was a frequent issue for me.
I agree. This is an issue. This is an issue that I had with the film Interstellar, which I adore, but it didn't know when to leave well enough alone. I think when you said the word confidence, that's the issue that I think both of those films had, actually. It wasn't confident enough that the audience could just take things away. It had to start giving and giving and giving, and
At
just
the
let it be. Let the
yeah,
ideas be.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
at the very end when he said point blank, almost looking into the camera, every one of those lives was just as meaningful as all the others. That could have been unspoken. It kind of took away from that message with him actually saying it. In Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country, there's a joke in that movie where Kirk kicks an alien in the knee, and the alien goes, "Oh," and he falls over and passes out, and he's like, "Oh, I'm glad that thing had knees," and somebody tells him that wasn't his knee, and then there's a beat, and then the person says, "Not everyone keeps their genitals in the same place, Captain." And Nick Meyer, this is like a Nick Meyer video. Nick Meyer said, it would be really nice if I could have left that joke, if I could have left that line out, and people would have just gotten, when he said that wasn't his knee, could have just gotten that it was his, his alien balls or whatever. But he felt that he had to describe it. It would have been really nice if they could have left out what may have been the point of the movie, which was that.
Yeah, I think the problem is this director is trying to be. You mentioned David Lynch and Mulholland Drive. What the film that came to my mind constantly when I was watching this is it was kind of, I felt like it was kind of going for the same thing that Donnie Darko was going for.
Yeah.
The potentialities and then that kind of. But this director is not. He was up to the task, but not totally. I feel like in the hands of another director, this could have been done perhaps a lot better. It doesn't seem to me like he had the confidence or maybe even the experience. I don't know. I don't know what else he's done. This kind of felt like the first time he tried something like this, and it kind of fell short. Kind of fell short a little.
Piggybacking on something that Andrew said about bringing up Mulholland Drive, and this is the criticism, just as he said, of this isn't comparing it to Mulholland Drive. This isn't a comparison, but it's just the point that David Lynch, the reason that Mulholland Drive works in the way that it does is because, and this is what I've been arguing with fans of this movie about for a while, David Lynch didn't have a complete idea in his head for what all of this stuff meant. All of it. He had a complete idea for some of it, and he executed it in a way that you can discern by watching the movie, but there was other stuff that was just left there in the ether, and he was really good at delineating those things. The person who wrote this film, it seems, had too clear an idea of what everything in it meant, and put too clear of an explanation for it.
Well, that's why I say he should have gone hard one way or hard the other, because I think
he knew how to do it. I don't think.
Yeah, I think this writer or director, I think it was the same person who did both. I think he's much better at the down to earth love story drama stuff than he is the airy fairy out there David Lynch kind of thing. That kind of stuff was okay, but going by what you guys said about how it's too clean, I felt like this is going to sound really counterintuitive. This felt like a generic artsy film. It felt too generic. It felt like you could tell this person was trying to make an art film. He wasn't
like
just
he really
doing
likes
it the way
Kubrick.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I've seen a little bit of Kubrick. I've seen a little bit of David Lynch. I've seen a little bit of trying to think of another. I don't know. Yeah, and I wanted. There you go. Or God, what the hell am I trying to think? Hang on. God damn it.
Well, while you think of it, I'll say
it's the weird one.
It's like Edward Scissorhands and all that.
Yeah. Yes.
Shit. I'm blanking on it too. Anyway, it's like
I just said
it. Yeah, he said it. He said it just now.
Tim Burton, sorry. Yeah. It's like when people try to use those filters that try to make it look like a grainy '90s VHS thing, but it just doesn't. It just doesn't look like that. Yeah, it was like a pastiche of an art film.
Yeah, it really was. In the times that it was trying to be an art film, and that's why I say, even if he wants to do the back and forth old man the room filling up with water while you're typing. He didn't have to do that. He didn't have to do it like that. And I think that his skills would be better applied elsewhere, because there's a lot of stuff in this film that was really, really good. But that particular kind of thing, as well as a couple other things, it just kind of takes you out. It doesn't absorb you the way a David Lynch does, or the
He
way
was
a
better
Kubrick
with
does.
the more subtle direction and editing, like when Elise and Nemo are having a conversation, and Elise is in the bed, and she is looking off to the right side of the screen, and she says something to him, and Nemo is on the right side of the screen looking left, and these are both two close-ups on the face, so they look as though they are talking to each other. But then when you cut back, you see that the two characters are actually back to back and not even looking at each other.
Yes.
Like there is a failure to meaningfully connect that is shown in the filmmaking, and I thought he was better at that, because the reason a filmmaker like David Lynch excels with surreal surreal visuals is that David Lynch could not give less of a fuck if you're confused. Whereas I felt that this film, while I appreciate how it would use like very like deep depths of field, like when they're in sort of that model village sort of area, so even the background is really crisp, which is not how our eyes work, meaning that we're seeing everything really pristine and it doesn't look like he's actually there, and it's lit weird so that like you can't tell if he's on a green screen or actually in a space. And I think he was actually in the space. I don't think it was a green screen in those little model village sections. That stuff is good, but I think some of the visuals he was going for, I'm not sure if they had a meaning behind them, or if it was because he just kind of liked it, like how you'd see the model village, that when the model village thing has, and that car rolls down the street and runs over that woman before it actually happens in real life, that I got that. But when you would return to some of those visuals of like the model village and the helicopters lowering blocks of water down into the ocean, I'll just be honest. Personally, I didn't get it. Maybe he did have a point there that I wasn't registering on, and if that case, that's my failing, not his. But
they said later about the helicopters lowering the water down. He said something that didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. The old man quips that the little kid put the water there because he needed it, and now he doesn't need it anymore. And then but it still doesn't explain 90% of what was going on in that scene. Yeah. And then he says he I can't even remember what the line was. It was too that's what I'm saying. It feels like this director is doing that kind of thing because he likes that kind of thing, not necessarily because he understands it or he has something to say himself. And very contrary to David Lynch not giving a fuck if you're confused or not. David Lynch, I believe, wants you to be confused. That's exactly where he wants you. This director seemed terrified as to whether or not anybody would be confused at times, but then at other times he'll just leave things hanging in midair. It was totally inconsistent. The most consistent parts of these films are the Anna parts and the Elise parts, and the parts where he's just feeling something. I also noticed that this main character had very, very little to say when we're dealing with issues of his life, because we are observing what he's going through, and everybody else in his life that has something to say or something, and he just reacts to them. The director's very, very good at that. The stuff with the helicopters putting the water in the ocean and that kind of thing, you just get the sense that it's indulgent rather than artistic. Like it's born out of he likes that stuff and he wants to do it too.
Yeah, even more than indulgent, just like this is the kind of thing that happens in these kinds of movies, so I have to find some kind of out there imagery to put into it to make it that kind of a movie, as opposed to actually having an idea for what it's supposed to be.
I have to wonder if that is in part why this film didn't do great critically, because you get some types of film watchers who I just can't vibe with, where they would see a film like this and go, this was crap, none of this made sense, it didn't mean anything, it was bullshit, and then assume that film critics would love it because it's artsy fartsy. And that is not how professional film critics look and examine film. This film didn't get a great reception. Neither did Darren Aronofsky's Mother. Actually, a lot of Darren Aronofsky's films didn't get glowing critical reception. And critical reception at the time is by no means a be-all and end-all. Blade Runner, Highlander, those films weren't popular with critics at the time, but now have been reevaluated. But while I think Mr. Nobody is having sort of like a reevaluation, I have to wonder if what you guys especially were talking about with, like, is this trying to be artsy for the sake of artsy? I have to wonder if that's why this film didn't do great with film critics, who maybe might have seen what you guys were seeing and then kind of like, because the friend who has been recommending me this for years, I said, I'm finally watching it. He said, I love the film, but I think it's a bit pretentious. And that normally gets my back up, because when someone says a film is pretentious, it usually means that they just weren't willing to engage with the film. And I don't know if I think this film was pretentious. I think this film was a bit insecure. Like, pretentious is when you're pontificating about something that doesn't have very much meaning. Like, it's not that deep, bro. And I don't think that's true of this film. But this film, like you said before, Daniel, is like terrified that you are confused or that you are lost, but still chose to go down this route of having not only two timelines, but multiple branching timelines from those two timelines of potential outcomes.
Yeah.
Because the first 30 minutes just establishes the world and the tone and his ability to see into the future. And then it splits off, and I went, okay, so we're now going to follow his life when he went with his dad and his life when he went with his mum. But it did get more complicated than that, because his life with his dad had multiple branching points, and so did his life with his mum. I also want to use that moment to say, like, Rhys Ifans is a terribly underrated actor. He's really good, and he's really good in this, and I think I would have liked a little bit more of him.
Is that the father?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was excellent.
Yeah.
Even just with what little they had in him in here, he did really great.
Yeah, he was. He's probably best known now for playing the Lizard in the Spider-Man movies, and I think.
Oh,
he's
that's
great
who that
there.
was.
Yeah, it's him.
Oh.
And he seemed like his dad seems like such a loving character who, I mean, accepts fault for their divorce, and then in contrast with Nemo's mum, who I just, as the film progressed, lost more and more sympathy for.
Yeah.
There are many timelines, and in all timelines, she's a cow.
Yeah, there are many timelines, and in all timelines, that she's just, she's not Mother of the Year. That's
completely self-absorbed. Yeah, irresponsible.
Yeah. I think this film needed more editing, like a lot more editing. Like the stuff about the stuff towards the beginning, like, for example, when it's like, we're seeing the kids in this angelic heaven, and then the angel sends them down. Again, the audience is going to sit there and ask themselves, what would we lose if this was gone? And that wasn't necessarily a bad scene. It was a great looking scene, but even in the more avant-garde films, like, we keep coming back to David Lynch. I guess he's the poster child for these airy-fairy avant-garde sort of things. When something even is just there for the sake of itself, which are sometimes in David Lynch films you do get that, it is supposed to stimulate your imagination and your curiosity to think about this imagery. But here, all we're being told is there are kids, before you're born, you know everything, and then you're born and you know nothing, and then it goes into the introduction of the parents. Why didn't he just start there? What was that supposed to make us think about? He spelled everything out as he was doing that scene, so you can't really absorb it in a subconscious
The film moves away from
ruminating
that
sort of
biblical
way.
aspect anyway. The film starts off with this biblical aspect saying it's because I didn't get the boop on the snoot from the angel. But by the end of the film, the implication to my eyes seemed to be the reason that he can see into the future and into other lives is because he died at the exact second that time stopped and started to reverse.
Yes.
That was the implication to me. Like, I understand it might just be like a child's rationalization, but like, bear with me because I'm going to talk about American Graffiti for a moment.
Oh, by all means.
So,
Sure.
American Graffiti doesn't have a plot, really, not in the traditional sense of the term. Like, American Graffiti is just characters with relationships and wants, and each of those characters is acting upon those wants and relationships, and the story just goes from there. By the end of American Graffiti, like, if your mum comes in and says, "So what was that film about?" you just go, "Kids on a night out."
Mm-hmm.
But that film works because, though it is so unbelievably simple, the characters pull you through it. And this film was always going to be fighting the uphill battle because Nemo isn't really a character. He's many characters because many different life experiences shape the many different versions of him. And that's fine. But I think that can make the film harder for like a general audience member to latch onto because the character that I thought was the most consistently consistent, I guess, were Anna and Elise, where it seemed like everyone was kind of a person except him, and I do understand that that's the point, but I think that can make it harder to grab onto because this is the opposite of American Graffiti. This is all plot,
Yeah.
all ideas, and that can be a danger.
Yeah, the with regard to the comparison of American Graffiti was about moments. It wasn't a plot. There was no plot there. You could have come into that film at any time and left at any time, or it could have kept going. It's not about the plot. It's about the moments in these kids' lives, and the audience has to care about those moments and care about the characters pretty much equally and consistently. This film is also about moments. The moments in these films are really all one can talk about because the structure is so strange. And it is really inconsistent in that regard. There are moments in this film that are absolutely astounding, and then there are moments where you're just kind of checked out and you want it to get back to something more interesting, like Anna and Elise, making the characters sort of the character is almost I don't want to say he's a surrogate character because we understand perfectly what's going on in the film whenever we're dealing with his life, but he's sort of a character that we're supposed to graft ourselves on, I feel, because he has so little to say about his own life, and that's all well and good, but it makes it really, really hard to get invested in that character in those moments because he is so many people, and we are trying to relate to so many things out of order and out of context. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And that's why I say I definitely landed on the side of this is a good movie, and I would recommend that people watch it, but it needed work, it needed editing, and it kind of needed, as you say, absolutely more confidence, and really just either more of a focused direction or more of the airy fairy stuff, because sometimes that stuff mixed well, and sometimes it didn't. And that's where I landed on the film. But I did think to close out my thoughts here, because I unfortunately do have to get going here in just a minute. I thought the film was, flaws and all, I thought this film was very good. It made me want to see some of his other stuff. I don't know if he's done much else than this, but if this was his first film, I would give it a little bit more of a pass on the stuff that didn't quite work because it's their first time out. If it wasn't his first film,
It was his third.
it was his third. Okay.
He directed 4 films. He was involved with more than that. He wrote some more, but he directed four films, and this was his third. And he hasn't directed a film in 7 years.
7 years. Wow.
Yeah.
Huh.
There's a moment, and I thought, I thought it was pretty funny. Harry goes, "I don't know what you two kids have got going on, but it's sick. Your brother and sister." And I went, "Harry, it sounds like you know what's going on." But both mentions of "he's not my brother" got a laugh out of me. And
I was a little bit confused about that, actually. I didn't know what that guy's problem was. They're not brother and sister. And if anybody thought that two obviously heterosexual boy and girls were going to live in the same house and not do what they were doing, it's very clear what they're doing. And so yeah, I was a little confused
when
as
they're
well.
both attractive young people as well.
Yeah,
like...
and they're freaking joined at the hip every single time you see them. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. Like, you know damn well what's going on, and fucking they're not brother and sister. What the hell? I thought that aspect of the film was more confusing than anything. I didn't know what the hell, if the director was even trying to say anything or if he was just trying to create a problem. But yeah, that had me laughing as well. I thought this. I don't know if it was supposed to be, but I thought it was pretty funny.
The Brazilian man who left his tap on or whatever, and that's why the paper got destroyed. That was the director.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
just
wow.
in a little cameo role, but I thought that was interesting. Yeah, this film, this film for me, that there's some really good performances in it, and there's some really good ideas for it. But I don't necessarily think it all worked. I would never in a million years call this a bad film. Never in a million years. But there was there were things that just don't connect for me. The main standouts for me were, I thought that the performances from Sarah Polly as Elise and Rhys Ifans as the dad, and particularly the performance of Juno Temple in, I think, what is probably a fairly early role from her. I just really wish Christopher Plummer were in it. I feel like they could have gotten
That's
that.
that was a good idea. That would have been really good casting.
Well, just to unpack for me, I can only say what I said at the beginning. I liked the message of the film, even though it was oddly explicit for a film of this kind. And other than that, I thought some of it was wonky. It was too clean. It was too shiny. All that. But overall, it was worth watching. It could have been shorter.
Yeah, it could have been shorter. It could have been a little bit. I think we seem to have landed on exactly the same conclusion. Good, but flawed. Could have been better. A plus for the stuff that worked. E for effort for the stuff that didn't, I guess. I'm glad you guys watched it, and I'm glad you guys liked it for the most part. I've been thinking about this film for about 10 years, and
That's great, and thank you for coming on as well.
Absolutely, yeah. It's difficult for me to. The public speaking is not my forte. I don't do a lot of public speaking, so. But no, this was fun, and I'm glad you watched it, and I'm glad you guys had notes. That's really cool. I didn't even take notes. Everything about this was off the top of my head, so that's really cool. Yeah, I'm glad you guys watched it. I'm glad for the most part you liked it.
You know, anytime you want to, we're happy to have you back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Cool.
Well, that was our thoughts on Mr. Nobody. Join us next time when we will be talking about Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country.